In a study on learning, 90 participants went through a software training program. And in the program, they were divided into two groups, and the first group was taught how to avoid mistakes in the software, and the second group was intentionally guided into mistakes in the software and then taught how to handle those mistakes effectively. And by the end of the training program, the second group was significantly more confident in their abilities with the software, and they were significantly more effective in their use of the software. They used it more effectively and more efficiently than the first group. And it's because they were taught how to handle the mistakes that they would inevitably face. So many times we think of mistakes as bad things that need to be avoided. But when we see mistakes in that way, mistakes become a hindrance to our improvement. But when we instead see mistakes as things that are an important part of our growth, an important part of the learning process, and we lean in to mistakes and then intentionally learn from them, that is how we improve and how we reach our highest capabilities. So one of the biggest keys to high performance is not avoiding mistakes, but rather leaning in to mistakes and learning how to respond effectively to them. So today I'd like to share with you two different mindsets that you can use as you approach mistakes. And these mindsets will help you to approach your mistakes more effectively and respond effectively to them so that they become a tool for you and not a hindrance for you. The first mindset that I'd like to talk about is what I call the teddy bear mindset. In the teddy bear mindset, you are kind and understanding and respectful toward yourself, even when you're imperfect. So another term to describe this mindset is self-compassion. I'd like to give you some tips to help you really understand and implement this mindset. So the first is a concept that comes from Kristin Neff, who's a researcher on self-compassion. She talks about the concept of common humanity as one aspect of self-compassion. So in order to really have the teddy bear mindset, you first need to implement the concept of common humanity, which is simply the understanding that imperfection and struggles are a universal aspect of the human experience. So when you struggle and when you fall short of perfection, when you make mistakes, that does not mean that you are broken. It means that you're human. So there's so many times when we feel isolated in our struggles and our mistakes. When we make mistakes and we fall short, we feel like I'm broken compared to everybody else. And we feel isolated and alone in that. Everybody else is better than me and more capable than me, and here I am making all these silly errors, and I just am not capable. But in reality, every single human being makes mistakes every single day. We fall short of perfection on a daily basis, and therefore expecting ourselves to be perfect, expecting ourselves to not make mistakes, just sets us up for frustration and discouragement and shame, and ultimately that leads to burnout and giving up. So we can't do that to ourselves. We need to recognize that mistakes are a universal, a normal, a natural part of the human experience and an important part of the process of improvement. And when we recognize that, mistakes stop feeling so shaming. They stop feeling like something to feel bad about, and they stop feeling so isolating. And they start feeling like something that actually unites us with all of humanity and something that we can actually use to our benefit. So that's the concept of common humanity as described by Kristen Neff. And I actually like to add a layer on top of that. I like to kind of take it to the next level, because to me, mistakes and imperfection is not just normal and natural and universal, but it's actually beautiful. Imperfection is a beautiful part of the human experience, because there's something just so beautiful about human beings trying the best that they can and falling and getting back up and pushing forward and striving to become something more than they currently are. To me, that is such a beautiful thing. So we don't even need to see mistakes as just normal. We can even see them as beautiful. They are a beautiful part of who we are. And the process of improvement is a beautiful thing. The second tip I'd like to give you for the teddy bear mindset is to validate your mistakes. So validation simply means to consider how it makes sense that a mistake could have happened. So many times when we make a mistake, we get down on ourselves and we think that was just a dumb thing. So we just kind of label ourselves as dumb or incapable, things like that. But when we can recognize how it makes sense that we could have gotten there, we're able to stop labeling ourselves in limited ways and to start simply learning from that mistake. So validation in a nutshell is simply understanding how it happened. So for example, I'll share a personal experience. A while back when I finished my master's degree, shortly after finishing it, I went to some local businesses to personally tell them about some services that I could offer them. And my very first couple interactions in these businesses were rocky at best. So my first one that I ever did, I walked through the doors, and right when I saw the people there at the front desk, I was just kind of hit with fear and tension and anxiety, and I let it control me. So I walked up to them and I kind of clumsily said something along the lines of, "Could I talk to a leader?" And they were really confused. They were like, "A leader? I don't know what you mean. We have all sorts of leaders in the company. What kind of leader are you looking for?" And my mind just went blank and froze, and I didn't even really know what I was looking for or who the type of person was that I was looking for. And eventually I just kind of clumsily started explaining to them what my services were that I was offering so that maybe they could help me figure out who I should talk to. But I explained my services in kind of a low energy, bashful, kind of apologetic way, because I was feeling like a nuisance to them. And so that's how I was interacting with them. And eventually I ended up just handing them some printed information about my services and walking out and feeling just kind of silly. So it definitely was pretty rocky. And what would validation look like in this situation? So validation in this situation could look something like this. Maybe it could be, okay, I definitely made plenty of mistakes in that interaction, but I can see how I got there. First of all, I was really nervous. I've never done this before, and it took all the courage in my being to simply walk through those doors and have that conversation. But because I was so nervous, I see that that led me to just kind of take action without even planning beforehand what my approach would be. So I basically had this fight or flight response in me, and it was the fight part of the fight or flight response. So instead of sitting there and deliberately planning my approach and then walking in and executing, my fight response was just get up and go. So I just got up and went into the building without having this planned approach. And so I just didn't have a mental map to follow for what to do in the situation. And I recognized that my fear also translated then into the flight part of the fight or flight response. When I actually got through the doors and saw the people there at the front desk, I felt like cowering, and my instinct was to walk right out of there. But instead of walking out of there, instead of actually fleeing, the flight response manifested itself in just approaching my interaction in kind of an apologetic and bashful way. And so I just realized that all of this was I was letting fear control me instead of me being in charge. So that's validation. I simply recognize how I got there. I notice that I got there because I was really nervous and I allowed the fear to take control. So again, it's not saying that it's something to be ashamed of, and it's not saying that it wasn't a mistake. Validation is recognizing the mistakes that we make, but simply recognizing how it makes sense that we got there. And then from that place, we can begin to stop being so hard on ourselves and just say, okay, I see how you got there, and now we can move forward for improvement. So that's the teddy bear mindset. And the two key tips with that is common humanity. Remember that we all make mistakes every day. We never have a perfect day. So it's normal and even beautiful. And that we need to validate our mistakes. That helps us to stop labeling ourselves in limited ways. The next mindset that I'd like to talk to you about is the scientist mindset. So in this mindset, you approach your mistakes like scientific experimentation. So you try to gather as much data as you can and then consider what you could experiment on to improve moving forward. So you ask yourself all sorts of questions after making a mistake. You can ask yourself things like, what caused the mistake? And what factors that contributed to the mistake were within my control, and which factors were outside of my control? And what did I learn from this mistake? And then finally, what could I try next time in order to do better? So in this same example that I gave you of the situation in which I had a clumsy interaction of trying to present my services in a company, I could go through this scientific process by first asking, okay, what caused this mistake? Again, that can actually flow really well from the validation process, because in the validation process, I was exploring the causal factors. But again, so I can explore things like, okay, what caused this? Well, I was feeling fear. I was worried about what the people were going to think about me personally and what they were going to think about the services that I was offering. I allowed that fear to be in control of me instead of me being in control of my own behavior. Also, I was allowing the fear to kind of spring me into action instead of making a deliberate plan beforehand, right? And I allowed the fear to put me into a flight response when I was actually in the middle of the situation. So that kind of led to me being apologetic. So these are kind of the factors that contributed. Then I can ask myself, which of these factors were within my control? Well, pretty much all of them were within my control. I have control over the way that I choose to perceive a situation. So whether I perceive it as a threat or as an exciting opportunity, I get to intentionally work out how I perceive it, right? So that was within my control. I also had control over my personal behavior. Instead of just allowing fear to control me, I could have chosen to be in charge of my own behavior. And so therefore I had control over whether I made a plan beforehand or not, and I had control over whether I presented myself with enthusiasm and confidence or with bashfulness and timidness. So those were all within my control. And then the only thing that was not within my control, which is the next question, was simply what they thought about me personally and my services. That was not within my direct control. But now that I understand the factors that were within my control, I can consider, well, what did I learn from this? And the main lesson that I learned was that when I take action based on fear, things do not turn out well. So I need to be in control instead of letting my fear be in control. And that leads to the final question, which is, what will I try to implement? What could I do next time in order to do better? So for me in this situation, that could look like, well, next time, if I notice that I'm feeling nervous beforehand, instead of just taking action based on that fight or flight response, I'll pause. I'll initiate a strategic plan. I'll think about, what am I going to do in order to be my best, most effective self in this situation? I'll create a mental map for success. And then when I walk in and communicate with these people, I'll do so in a way in which I convey enthusiasm and confidence instead of shyness and bashfulness. So those are things that I could implement next time. For you, as you implement the teddy bear mindset, where you're compassionate toward yourself, and the scientist mindset, where you really analyze the data behind your mistakes and consider how you can use that data to your advantage, you'll find that mistakes stop being such a burden and such an obstacle, and they start becoming a tool for you to use to your advantage, so that you can grow and become the best version of yourself and actually enjoy the process along the way, and actually enjoy the process of making mistakes and overcoming them and improving, instead of facing them with frustration and discouragement and shame. Thank you so much for listening today. I truly appreciate it. Please make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Those are so helpful. And also share this on social media so that more people can benefit from it. Thank you so much. Let's go be high performing today.